You just lost every single mark on the asymmetric encryption question, and you don't even know why yet. Picture this. You've spent weeks memorizing literally every textbook definition of public and private keys. You walk into that Cambridge IT 9626 exam, you write a massive, full-page answer, and a few months later, you open your results and stare at a devastating 0 for that section. Why? Because you made one tiny, incredibly common analytical mistake that forced the examiner to just take out their red pen and strike right through your whole response. And that fatal mistake looks exactly like this. Most candidates just list facts. They write these generic textbook statements like, well, the public key encrypts and the private key decrypts. And sure, that's true, but they completely fail to tie those functions to the actual scenario provided in the exam paper. They totally ignore the data interpretation skills you need at this level. Look, the examiner isn't looking for a parrot, right? They're testing whether you can actually apply these concepts to a totally unfamiliar context. If you're just dropping memorized facts without any structured reasoning, you are literally risking an entire grade boundary in just one single question. And guys, you absolutely cannot afford to just skip over this. Topic 1.3, Methods of Encryption, specifically asymmetric private and public keys, appears in literally 100% of Cambridge examination series for the syllabus. 100%. It is an unavoidable hurdle. You are going to face this topic. The difference between the top band candidates and, the rest of the pack isn't how late they stayed up revising. So let's get into section 1, the quick win, and look at the method mark strategy. Okay, let's look at this quote pulled straight from the Examiner Insights. Even if your final answer is wrong, method marks can save you. So what does that actually mean for you in the exam hall? Basically, it means examiners are actively hunting for your methodical working. They desperately want to see your systematic process. If you follow a standardized sequence, identifying the key elements, applying the relevant principles, and physically showing your clear analytical working on the page, you are banking marks along the way. Your working out isn't just extra effort, it is literally your safety net, even if your final technical conclusion gets a bit tangled up under exam pressure. But here is the really critical part. In just a moment, I'm going to show you the hidden examiner clue. It's literally a single word that changes your required answer completely and dictates the entire mark scheme. If you miss this clue, honestly, no amount of working out is going to save your grade. But before we get to that, you first need the structural framework that actually makes that hidden clue glaringly obvious when you're reading the paper. Which brings us to Section 2, the framework for building top-end answers. This is the exact procedural framework you need to tackle those complex, high-stakes, past paper problems on asymmetric encryption. And what's really cool here is just how logical this standardized sequence actually is. Step 1, deconstruct the question. Step 2, extract the relevant data from whatever texts or tables they give you. Step 3, select your analytical framework. Step 4, execute with clear notation. And finally, Step 5, present it all with the correct terminology. Guys, this isn't just a helpful suggestion. This is the precise technical methodology that Cambridge outlines. You have to extract relationships and draw evidence-based conclusions, not just write down what a public key is. And this perfectly illustrates how we actually execute Step 4 of that process. It's the Peel framework, but modified for these higher-order IT questions. Point, evidence, explanation, link, and judgment. When top-scoring candidates structure their evaluative thinking, they never just make a point. They back it up with evidence from the scenario. They give a clear explanation of the technical mechanics, like exactly how the private key mathematically pairs with the public key. Then they link it right back to the specific security needs of the business in the question. And finally, they provide a judgment on how effective that encryption method actually is. That's how you get the points. All right, moving into Section 3, side-by-side analysis. Let's look at flawed versus improved answers. Let's see how this actually builds in a real-world exam scenario. If we do a direct comparison, the flawed, superficial attempt here on the left reads something like, asymmetric encryption uses 2 keys. A public key is shared with everyone, and a private key is kept secret to decrypt data. Now, yeah, that's technically true, but it's totally vague. It scores almost nothing. But look at the top band answer on the right. This candidate uses that Peel structure we just talked about. They actually mention the specific company from the case study. They explain how the asymmetric pair secures their specific database transfer. They use the correct formatting and terminology, and they evaluate the performance impact of the encryption. The structural difference is absolutely striking. And believe me, the difference in marks is massive. The really crucial point here is that the answer on the right demonstrates what Cambridge calls evaluative thinking. What does that mean? It means questioning assumptions, considering different perspectives, and justifying your decisions with solid evidence. Top-scoring candidates always identify the limitations. So, for example, they might note that while asymmetric encryption is highly secure for the initial key exchange, it's also computationally heavy, which might actually be a huge limitation for the specific company in the case study. That extra layer of insight, that is exactly how you hit the highest mark band.
Okay, now it's your turn for the examiner challenge, Spot the Error.
I want you to actively engage with this one. Step into the shoes of the senior examiner for a second. Imagine a candidate writes a technically flawless explanation of how a mathematically linked key pair works. They correctly note that a message encrypted with a public key can only be decrypted by the corresponding private key. The formatting, perfect. The terminology, flawless. And yet, they somehow score less than half marks on a 10-mark question. I want you to actually pause and predict right now. Where did this candidate lose their evaluation marks? What crucial step in the analytical framework did they completely miss? Well, if you guess that they ignored the context, you are thinking exactly like a principal examiner. Check out the top 3 warnings straight from the examiner reports. Number 1, answers are too vague. Number 2, students forget format and presentation. But number 3, guys, this is the absolute killer. Answers lack specific context. This imaginary candidate committed the fatal sin of writing a brilliant, textbook perfect answer that had absolutely nothing to do with the specific business scenario provided in the exam. You have to remember, context is king in IT 9626. Which brings us to a really foundational rule of this entire syllabus. The assessment framework prioritizes analytical depth over superficial breadth. Examiners are strictly grading you on precise definitions and, crucially, your cross-topic integration. If you can connect the principles of asymmetric encryption to, say, network security protocols or data privacy legislation that you learned about elsewhere in the syllabus, you are showing them that connected, conceptual understanding that examiners absolutely love. That's what gets you the top marks. Moving on to Section 4, the missing link. Let's finally close the loop. It's time to circle back to that question I asked you earlier about the hidden examiner clue. When you apply this step-by-step procedural framework, deconstructing the question, mapping out your Peel response, one specific thing suddenly leaps right off the page at you. That hidden clue? It's the command word. Words like define, describe, explain, analyze, evaluate, apply. Every single one of these words demands a completely different structural response. You could have the perfect asymmetric encryption framework memorized, you could understand a public and private keys flawlessly, but if the examiner asks you to evaluate and you only explain, your grade is going to absolutely tank. Misreading a command word is the silent killer of top grades. You need to know exactly how to shift your strategy based on just that single word. And honestly, that is exactly what we are decoding in our next essential explainer. If you want to actually survive the IT 9626 exam, mastering these command words is not just optional, it is mandatory. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, AC Exams, at acexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. Click the explainer on your screen right now to discover the exact command words that decide your mark band. Because seriously, are you really going to let a single misread word stand between you and your top grade? Click over, and I'll see you there.